Hey everybody, I'm here with Bryan from Polymega. How you doing?
Hey guys.
So I think there's going to be a lot of people watching this that either don't know too much about either one of us, so I think it's good in this case to start with a little bit about who we are and our background. I'm Bob from RetroRGB. I'm the founder, and obviously I love retro gaming and anything nerdy. I got a background in system admin IT stuff as well as product design. So I worked for a small company that did medical grade computers. So I was a team leader for things like manufacturing, product design, thermal design, support. Pretty much understand what it's like to have a smaller company that makes hardware. Also, I live in New York, so you're going to hear lots and lots of sirens and stuff. So sorry about that. I'll try to mute where applicable. And that's pretty much it. I'm the founder of RetroRGB, and I just try to get to the bottom of everything. I love all this tech stuff, and the more the merrier. And I think some people sometimes see my comments and mistake my perspective on these things. So I wanted to talk to you today just to get everything out in the open and let people make their own decisions about how they feel about it. So.
Yeah, for sure. And just to give a little recap on myself, I'm Bryan Burnell. I am the CEO and co-founder of Polymega Inc. We are the creators of the Polymega modular multimedia system, which is what we're calling it now. My background, I started in games back in about 2003, 2004. I worked for Interplay. I was a tester there. It was my first scrubby job in the games industry. When Interplay sort of started going downhill a little bit, I was recruited to come work at Insomniac by the QA manager at Interplay. Mm-hmm. I was in QA at Insomniac for about a year, and then I moved up into a coordinator and then an assistant producer role. And I was working on games like Ratchet & Clank, Resistance Fall of Man, and a bunch of other stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I was the full project manager of several of the Ratchet titles also for the PlayStation 3. So that was Kraken Time and Quest for Booty and a bit of future Tools of Destruction.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So just a little bit of the backstory, my friend Arturo texted me the other day and said that he got a chance to demo the Polymega live, and I asked that he bring me along as well because I really wanted to check it out. Immediately I saw that it was a real product, and I saw some of the ways you were interacting with it, and it's definitely not a fake. It's definitely not a Coleco Chameleon situation. You didn't load up a Raspberry Pi with your own GUI and try to fake it. So I, at the very least, wanted to put that out there first. I would have loved to have done the interview in person, but I know that you had a flight to catch. And I wanted to get the info out there because I had questioned myself. I had read the forum trolls and I had read the speculation. And in the days at Theranos and the Fire Festival, it seemed plausible that there could have been problems with this. So the fact that I even said that out loud, I felt I deserved, or that you deserved, for at least me to say, yes, this is a real product. Don't know who it's for yet. We'll figure that out. But and the responses I got to that were very interesting. There's always there's always the irrational trolls, in which I really don't care what they say. And even some of my friends were acting that way, which is a little strange to me. But it just kind of goes to show how people's perceptions of the Polymega might be. But a lot of people, and I would hope the majority of the people that saw it, probably had the same thoughts I did, in that, all right, it's real, let's see who this is for, let's see what it's about, and let's maybe get some questions answered as to why some of the perspectives have been so negative over the past 6 months, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at some of the comments on the promo video that you put together, I was kind of I was taken aback a little bit about how folks that were seemingly followers of yours were reacting, and calling you a sellout for looking at the Polymega or giving it the time of day. And I think it's good that you touched on the fact that it was Arturo who invited you. I didn't even know you were going to be coming until he had mentioned it. And I was like, I don't know if he really likes our system that much based on some previous interactions, but I was like, I'm open. We got nothing to hide. The system, we're confident in what it does. I would be happy to have him check it out, and I'm really that happy that you did.
Cool. So I guess I think we should skip to the end and answer the two questions that were the most heated over the past few months? We already answered that it is a real product. We'll get into more about that later. But can you just address the rumor that you were refusing refunds for people that had pre-orders?
Well, that's actually, I had only heard of that one time that one person tweeted about. That's absolutely untrue. We've provided a ton of refunds. We've actually reinstated a lot of people's orders who requested refunds as well in the recent weeks since we've come back out and shown everything that we've been working so hard on. So I would say that that's probably just a rumor. If there is any situation where something like that happened, it definitely flew under my nose. I don't think that that's, I mean, I've certainly directed our customer service team to, comply with whatever the customer's requests are because, it's their money.
Mm-hmm. So I have to ask a question in a different way as well because of something else that had happened. I know it's unfair to ask you this based on something on a different interview, but where can people go to get refunds and how can people be reassured that that's an option? Because I did have somebody on here a while back that swore up and down and provided proof that he was giving refunds, and then it turned out he only gave 1 or 2 refunds, and most other people were just left ignored.
Yeah, you can on our website. It has the contact page, and for any kind of support matters, the email address is on there. You can contact us at support@playmaji.com, and we have a full-time customer service person who handles all of those requests. And there are from time to time things that get slipped through, depending on if perhaps when they emailed we were having some issues with Hotmail or things like that, which have been hopefully rectified by this point. But if anyone does have any questions about their order, wants a refund, wants to reinstate, wants to change their shipping address, we've been dealing with dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of requests like that over the course of the last few weeks. So we're happy to help you guys out in any way possible, and we want you guys to be reassured and confident that when you have placed an order that you're going to get it and you're going to get the service that you deserve. Cool.
So I guess if you don't mind, let's just go back to the beginning. And I first heard of this product being called the Retro Blocks. And I'm as a nerd, I'm not the biggest fan of creative marketing terms, but that's life. You can't have a product sell without good marketing. So I read the hybrid emulation thing, and I kind of giggled because it reminded me of blast processing. Sure, it's a thing. Is it really? Is it not? But I think right away that kind of struck some people oddly. And then I believe you changed at one point and decided to just go straight emulation. So can you kind of walk us through the whole path of all of that and I guess through the pre-order period?
Well, okay, so going all the way back to the beginning of the product, so I think I had mentioned this in some other interviews, but when this project started, I was really only intending to make an FPGA PC engine. That's what this was originally envisioned as. And the co-founder of the company at that time, who is currently the CTO, or I don't know if he's the CTO, or he's maybe the principal engineer over at Atari, working on their new system. So he and I came up with an idea for doing emulation a little bit differently. There was never an intent to have an FPGA. Sorry, let me rewind for a second. The PC Engine FPGA idea was nixed early on. We thought that there was maybe, it wasn't a big enough market for such a specialty device, even though I personally would have loved it because I'm a huge collector. I have probably 700 PC Engine games, make a very large collection. The timing for it, the sort of market size that we were estimating, we didn't really think that we would be able to bring a product to market that would really, make a big, huge impact. And Analog was already doing great stuff with, the NT Mini and things like that, and we didn't want to just make that. We wanted to make something that was a little bit different. Rob, being a technologist and one of the system architects of the original Xbox, had come up with a new idea for how to emulate consoles a little bit differently. It would always involve an emulator. It wouldn't be just a purely FPGA console, but it would work in concert with some kind of microcontroller. It could be an FPGA, it could be a CPLD, it could be the original hardware from the old console, it could be any number of things. But the way that we envisioned that microprocessor interacting with the original CPU was that it was going to ferry data back and forth between the cartridge in real time. The key was finding the right interface for that. And we worked really hard for a long time to try to figure out how to get that data going back and forth at the right speed for all of the systems, which ran at variable speeds, as you know. So, and actually, this is the board here. If you want to see this is the original hybrid emulation prototype board. And what you can see here is a dual inline memory module connector on the bottom. And this actually plugs directly into the RAM slot of a PC. And what blocked this from becoming fruition, and this isn't necessarily, and this actually is a 14-layer PCB. It has a Xilinx FPGA on it. This is an intense piece of hardware. We spent a lot of time in R&D on this. This is not dead. This is something that we still aspire to reach. We do think it is a great end goal for what Polymega can be. But we did get blocked by a software issue while developing it. That software issue had to do with timings of the memory. The memory interface in the BIOS. And we didn't have a BIOS engineering team at the time that would be able to get us in at such a low level that we could access those timings and adjust them. So we looked at what we had, and we looked at what people were excited about, and we looked at what we were ready to take to market and what would have possibly delayed us for quite a while on the project. And we made the decision that going further with that, or spending more time in R&D on getting that to a commercially viable level that was affordable for people, was something that was going to take a little bit longer and need more time in the oven. So we did change course, and we did make a mistake by not announcing that change early enough.
So just to get the timeline correct here. So
yeah.
This product that you were talking about, you opened pre-orders for it and you started the marketing, and that's when you started to run into the issue where you realized it's impossible to do it the way we thought we were going to do it.
No, we actually opened the pre-order. So when we were, I think what we're looking at is maybe E3 of last year, in the window between E3 and when the pre-order opened, which was in September. Mm-hmm. So we had planned still to use the hybrid emulation setup until about midsummer. We made the change at that point in time because we wanted to bring out the announcements for Saturn. So we were hoping to have that just be plain as day on the website. However, the problem is that our website was down. It actually was overloaded, and so I think what happened was a few people squeaked through. We didn't really get that many orders through in the first couple of days because of the uptime issue. Mm-hmm. And due to that, the information being available for folks became harder for them to actually see as well. So when we opened the pre-orders, it was a little bit of a challenge, and we said let's just go ahead and announce that on social media rather than using the website for that. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have announced it 6 to 8 weeks before the launch of the pre-order campaign. In retrospect, that definitely was a mistake, and I do apologize to folks for that. But I hope that we've been as transparent as possible with what the system is now and what people's expectations can be or should be with the system. And I think we're really proud of what we have too. The hybrid emulation is like trying to hit a ball out of Shea Stadium and have it hit the moon. We think right now the Polymega is a solid grand slam. The thing is really good. It's pretty solid to play, and there's just a ton of potential, like you said in your promo video.
So that right there explains the first pause that people had about it, because if people weren't following closely, if they had just read your marketing materials all the way up until that time, and let's just say the timeline is spot on to what you just said, it's very plausible that a lot of the people that ended up pre-ordering didn't reread everything because they thought they already knew what the product was about. And I think, stuff happens. There's nothing you could do about that, but once you plant the seed of doubt into people, I think that's why this thing probably started spiraling the way it did. And I think I've been asked questions about this because I am involved in a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff across the retro gaming hardware world. And although the first time we really spoke was in New York a few days ago, mm-hmm. I think a lot of people assumed that I might have known something behind the scenes. So while I always was honest and said, no, I just know the same that you know, I got to hear people's perceptions of what they thought it was. And it was very clear that your average person who was interested in this thought that the original marketing materials was what they had pre-ordered, and that's certainly it's a valid reason for a consumer to be angry, especially after they've already spent money on something.
Well, we're happy to handle any of those issues with customers. If anyone watching this wants to reach out to us, we're happy to resolve that for you.
Mm-hmm. So, I think the product's a little bit delayed at the moment, right? But to be honest, hardware delays, I mean, that's nothing. You have no control over that. You're not, Intel. So
right, yeah. And as you've seen, the system is at least as far as the base unit goes, we're still making some little tweaks to the controllers and things like that to get the weight just right and things. So it's not entirely Intel, but it is like if we could ship right now, we would be shipping the base units. The thing that's sort of holding everything up is the supply shortage from the 14 nanometer chips from Intel. So our rep and the team that we're interfacing with to get these chips has stated that the supply issues should ease up over the summer, meaning that we can start. We're already in production, tooling, and we are scaling manufacturing right now. If that stuff, if the chips come through, say in July, we will definitely have them in the August timeframe. If the chips come earlier than that, we will have them earlier. So we're just hoping, we've got our fingers crossed. We're hoping that those chips come through and we'll be able to deliver a little bit, hopefully on the earlier side of summer, but if not, then latest would be probably August, September.
Mm-hmm. Now, the first impression I got about the console is something that some people seem to think is a negative thing, which I never understood before, during, or after Polymega, and that it struck me as an emulation console that was designed to have no configuration, which is something that's a huge problem. Unless you're an IT nerd, trying to figure out how to run emulation is challenging. And I've been doing this since I was a kid, so it's still a pain in the butt for me sometimes too, depending on controller mapping, configuration. So the thought of just first of all, the thought of something being sold that you don't even have to worry about it is great. There's a lot of kind of slapped together crap versions of that out there now that use all illegal IP, illegal ROMs, stolen emulators, and I got the impression talking to you that your main focus was to make sure that this was legal and that you licensed everything that you're using, and certainly no Hyperkin stealing emulator scenarios here. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that, but I also want you to know going into this, if this is just an emulation box that requires no setup, there's nothing, that should be something that you would brag about, certainly not be ashamed of, because no one's pulled that together in a mass-produced consumer-grade product with no setup yet.
Well, I think that's sort of the trick, right? And for folks who are so ensconced in the world of retro games and know how know the emulators, know their quirks, know everything inside and out, this may not be the product for them. But however, when I first got back into retro gaming, like I said, I was a producer for mainstream games for a long time. I took a trip to Japan back in, I think, 2013, and I brought back all my systems and everything and tried to set them all up. And I went through this whole process over the course of about 6 to 8 months where I was resoldering caps, doing the whole thing that everyone does when they are first kind of starting this out. And I was just like, who's got time for this? I would have friends that come over, they're like, how do I get this set up and how do I play? And none of them would have the time or wherewithal to be able to go through that process that I went through personally. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and if you've got a kid and family and stuff like that, forget it. It's too much to do, and it's not really a conducive way to have to experience your retro games in 2019. I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities out there, and I think some of the tension also between the retro games emulation community and the commercial mainstream current gen game publishers and things like that. That's a long unresolved issue that I think a system like Polymega can help resolve. If you look at the world of of current gen games, and the amount of I worked on these games, and I think the budget for our projects was somewhere north of $20 million, and that's nothing compared to today's standards. As a developer, I look at the IP infringement that casually occurs as being somewhat of a problem. It's accepted, and I'm not going to knock people who download torrents of games and things like that. It's not a personal issue for me, but I know that when it comes to, if we ever want to see a new game developed for a classic platform by a major publisher, those types of things, and the rampant use of intellectual property is going to be something that turns publishers away from investing time and money into new classic games. And I think that that's something that I personally would really like to see. And I think it's something that we could all benefit from. And there's not really a good platform that would allow that to happen. You do see some re-releases and packs and things like that come out on current gen systems, but they don't really, at least for me as a primarily retro gamer, I'm not really interested in what's coming out on current gen consoles quite as much as I am with new developments in the retro scene. I get much more excited about something, like seeing a new Castlevania on Super NES, or a direct sequel to Rondo of Blood, or something like that. Like, I would love to see these types of games developed, and it's possible for them to do that. You see new engines being created, you see new tools being developed. NES Maker, I think, is a good step in the right direction. It's limited in terms of what you can do right now, but if you think about a dedicated development team creating somewhat of a unity for retro games, that where a publisher can invest a smaller amount of money into developing a new game using classic IP for a classic system, I think you could see some really cool stuff there. And I don't really see any kind of viable platform that's out there today, except for Polymega, that would allow something like that to happen.
Agreed. There's a few people trying to approach it from a software point of view, but any retro gamer would tell you that you have to pair it with some kind of hardware. Even, I guess, just a controller, but whatever. You have to have some kind of marriage between the software and hardware, or else you could potentially have a perfect experience on one thing and a terrible on another. So I think that stuff's important. So it sounds like your goal is to not just have this be something that you could play existing games, but something that you could open up publishers to either sell their existing games or even publish new games on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that if I look at, so I guess when you look at our vision of where we want to take things, the preservation of the games is very important. I look at stuff like iTunes and the iPod, and people digitally archiving their CD collections and selling them off and things like that. We may never sell off our retro games because we love them and we like to collect them and put them on the shelf, and we hold them dear for those reasons. But I think that there's an opportunity to preserve your collection digitally for preservation matters, and having a very capable box based on emulation, FPGA, whatever it is, something that you can use to play those games using an interface that your kids can understand. Kids like to play. They're used to using Netflix, and they're used to using their iPads and things like that, and they're not really used to combing through lists of games that you might see going through an EverDrive or something like that. It doesn't really mean anything to them when they see those game names. So having a really nice interface and something that feels familiar to them is really important to us. And then if we look at 20 years from now, how are we playing these games? How are they living on? Are we continuing to get collections rehashed onto whatever current gen system is out, or maybe even the game console itself is no longer around, and we're using products like Google Stadia or whatever, or what have you? What really happens to these games at that point? The hardware now is not really that old, so we can keep them alive using restorative techniques. But if you look at and that's looking back at maybe say from the 1980s to the mid 1990s, we can keep those systems alive right now. But and much like an old vinyl player. So, but if you were going to go back to like like, say, the 1950s, now that starts getting a little bit more difficult to keep that hardware alive. You really, really, really have to spend a lot of time, keeping those things or keeping those vintage pieces of hardware in tip-top shape, and that's not going to really work for everyone. So we do look quite a ways down the line as far as how people are going to be experiencing these games, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of the traction with the publishers. And even if we don't, one of the reasons why we built Polymega to be compatible with the classic games media was so that you can still continue to have a really modern experience with every single game that ever came out for the systems, regardless of whether that publisher is now owned by a bank or a foreclosure company or whatever it is, whatever the status of that intellectual property is today. We're not beholden to them and what their IP is. You can still have that great modern experience, and we may never work with Nintendo because they're very cautious about where their IP appears. We're totally cognizant of that. We're not thinking that we're very pragmatic about the fact that we may never ever work with Nintendo, but you can still go buy that $5 Super Mario Brothers, and under fair use rules, you can plug it into a Polymega and still get that great experience. So we think that there's a lot of value there. Looking forward to the future, and while it may not be, I think if you compare it to systems like, say, the analog, you have a completely different sort of offering there. You have disk-based systems. That stuff costs, or that stuff requires software engineering that may not be easily replicated on a purely FPGA console. But you also have low latency inputs. I know you got a chance to play using the USB connection just the other day. That's pretty fast. It's not our fastest interface, though, so we're going to be bringing those modules out for you to check out next month.
So I do think any kind of comparisons to the analog products is apples and oranges, but I certainly do like the vision that you just described of what you would like to see the product turn into. But I think a lot of people want to know what it is that they're going to get the day that it arrives at their house.
Yep.
Now you guys have been outright about the base module is pretty much done, but the add-on modules are going to be delayed a little bit. So from the base module perspective, when somebody opens this up, they're going to have, good hardware, good design. I saw the plastic case, everything was good. And, good UI, easy to scroll through. But when you open it up, what are the first things that you're able to do? So Saturn and PlayStation, it looked like, right off the bat?
Oh yeah, well, so of course the system is compatible with all of the CD systems without any modules at all. So right off the bat, you're able to play Sega Saturn, you're able to play PlayStation, you're able to play Neo Geo CD, TurboGrafx CD, and Sega CD. Okay. So all those systems work right out of the box without any additional hardware or any modules.
Now, you had said that I think a lot over the past few months about how you were writing your own BIOSes for those CD consoles so that you wouldn't actually infringe upon anybody's IP. That's a tremendous amount of work.
It is.
I saw the Saturn one in action, and when I put the CD in, it pretty much ran exactly like a Saturn. When I played the version off of the hard drive, it did boot faster, which was a really nice bonus. So, I mean, how long did that take in order to do all these different BIOS configurations?
Well, we have some of the top Sega Saturn developers in the world working on this project, and we have done everything 100% by the book. We're aware of all the various precedents that have been set by Sony versus Connectix and Sega versus Accolade. We have done all of our homework on that, and we've abided by every dotted I and crossed T that's in there. And basically, I'm sorry, my light just turned off here. So basically, what we did was we had one of our developers write the BIOS to a specification that was created separately by a person outside of our company that had already documented the Sega Saturn BIOS, and we purchased that from him, and then we created and wrote the new Sega Saturn BIOS internally, and I guess it took maybe about 3-4 months to do. That's one of the reasons we didn't really show a lot of the Sega Saturn also at the beginning. It's really cool to see Sega Saturn running. We wanted to be very cautious about how we used the code for the system due to the sensitivity around the legal issues with the BIOS. So when we were demoing some of the systems before, you probably saw it use the save state to jump ahead past the boot screens for the Sega Saturn, was because it was running on the original BIOS. So for us, we needed to have the BIOS completely done before we really got out there and started showing this thing fully in action. At this point in time, we have Sega Saturn completely done. It's 99% compatible. If there's anything that comes up, we are able to fix it pretty much right away. So we are pretty dedicated to if someone tosses in an odd demo disc or karaoke disc and it's not working for some reason, it'll go on a list and we'll be looking at it for a compatibility update on the console. PlayStation, we had announced earlier that I think it's 95% compatible. It's a little bit lower in compatibility, and that's primarily because the system just has way more games. There's tons and tons and tons of PlayStation games, and some of it's untested, especially if you look at that Japanese collection. There's something like 3,500 games. So there's a lot of work to do there. We're going to need everybody's help to make sure that we get as much coverage on that as possible. But again, we're dedicated to making sure that we have as high compatibility as possible with our PSX BIOS and Sega Saturn BIOS. Now for the other systems,
a few things just to interject for a little bit. So first of all, it's my personal opinion that is certainly the approach that I would have taken, and that the product would never release if you tried to wait for everything to be perfect. And in a product that's designed to be plugged into the internet, asking to do an update probably frequently at first is a reasonable thing, at least in my opinion. But one of the concerns that was definitely being loudly echoed when you started doing the demos was that you were only showing Saturn. And I kind of jokingly said to Art when we walked in there, like, I wonder if they're only going to let us play Saturn. Does this thing even play other games? And it did. I demoed a bunch of different consoles on it. Is there a reason that you were sticking to really only showing Saturn footage? And, is it at launch date going to be able to actually, not all of them, but play all of those CD systems that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we have a couple of systems that are still in progress right now in terms of the BIOS work. So I'll tell you which one is the lowest priority on our list, and that's because the BIOSes are available in physical form. The lowest on the list is TurboGrafx and PC Engine. Mm-hmm. I think I have personally maybe 5 or 6 system cards from Japan or arcade cards and stuff like that. So it's compatible with the system cards and you can install them and it'll just work. We do target to have every system have a BIOS, either HLE or BIOS replacement ready to go with the system when we deliver. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's going to be a question. But Neo Geo CD and Sega CD, they both have their BIOSes that are being written right now. So there is a little bit more work, a little bit more software work that we're doing on that front. But of course, you can always sideload any of the official BIOSes if you want to. We just can't provide them for you.
So one of the things that I had seen many people echo, both in a trolly way and in a very respectful way, was that they got the impression that you did a pre-order on a product that wasn't done yet. And I, to be perfectly honest, I don't really know how I would feel about that, because in many cases you can't finish a product without funding, and not just crowdfunding. For the history of companies, it's very rare to see somebody have a complete finished design before they ask for funding. Usually you need it for R&D. So it sounds like that's kind of what it is, and I don't view that as a bad thing, but I think people are now open to make up their own minds about that, because I could certainly vouch for what I've seen, what you've showed, and I guess as long as you're aiming to have them done by launch date, that's okay. But what about the cartridge stuff? So now you were always upfront about the modules. That's fine. At first, I'm assuming people could load their ROMs up and play if that's what they choose to do. But are the cartridge-based emulators going to be available on launch day as well?
Well, let me correct you. You can't use any kind of ROM side-loaded onto the system. This is a system that's, primarily you use the cartridge. You have the option to just play it, or you can install it separately into the system, and then you no longer have to use the cartridge anymore. Same thing goes with CDs.
So if you, I actually wanted to get back to that one in a separate question. So there is no way that you're allowing people to just add ROMs to an SD card or something and play it off of that. You require the original cartridge itself?
Correct. And the reason for that is because of the relationships that we're building with publishers. We don't want to, and listen, we have no disillusions that people are going to attempt to crack this system and hack the system. If Sony can't stop them, there's a snowball chance in hell that we're going to be able to stop them. But in order to play ball and do the things that we really want to do from a high level with this system and to get to those goals, we really need to be as dedicated to not supporting piracy as possible, because playing nice with those publishers is what's going to result in you guys having better games to play on the system in the future.
And but if you do have your own cartridges, you plug them in, and I imagine that it would have to be a scenario where even if you didn't specifically tell it to rip into the hard drive, it would have to, because it has to read from the ROM and not from the cartridge in real time, right?
Well, there's a bunch of different. So our modules are pretty unique. So the way that they work is you have the cartridge slot. There's also onboard games, which are included with the system. So there's Flash actually embedded in the cartridge. In the module, and then you have your controller ports, which run over a different interface entirely from the one that dumps the game ROM. Mm-hmm. So for those games, we also have a huge database of all of the games with our system. I think there's something like 15,000 games in it right now. Mm-hmm. And anytime it detects one of those games, we have a database of all the art, the UI, assets, and everything like that that matches based on a CRC that's generated from the game, or a sampling of the code or a sampling of the game ROM. Mm-hmm. And then it matches up and brings up all the nice art and everything that you see on the system.
Okay. And when you rip the ROMs, that should be pretty straightforward and easy, all things considered. ROM dumpers have been around for a long time now. But CD ripping, that's something that not only would speed up your loading times, but with disk rot happening now, it's going to be way sooner than people expect that their games are going to stop working.
It's already happened to me, yeah.
Yeah, so how are you handling ripping to the hard drive, and is it in a way where it's a true representation of it? Are you compressing them down? How really does that happen?
It's a true representation of it. It's totally accurate. What happens is you can actually play so when you insert a game, and this is something that there's still a little bit of work that's going on with the caching system, mm-hmm. but essentially what's happening is when you insert a CD-ROM game, we take a sampling of that track by track, and we start caching the game into memory. And when the game is you can actually play the game while that caching's happening. You can elect to install the game in the background while you're playing the game. It's quite modern actually in the way that it works. You can play any of the systems while you're installing games. You can get a heads-up display on what your progress of the installation is, and that takes some of the sting out of the install process, because some of these larger games do actually take quite a while, and we don't read them all at the exact same speed, because we try to read them at the same speed as the original system did, mm-hmm. So that you're getting that accurate rip of the game. I know a lot of times when people like to make duplications of their or archive copies of their games, you like to use the lowest speed setting possible so that you're getting the most accurate representation of the game when it's dumped. And we do the same thing. Certain systems dump the game or rip the game CD very quickly. For example, PlayStation 1. PC Engine and Neo Geo CD tend to take a little bit longer because they have slower drives. And so it sort of depends on what it is, but we're trying to make sure that we're giving you the best digitally archived copy of the game possible.
Cool. Now, for the emulators that are on there, are those, you mentioned that you're licensing everything. Are those in-house? Are those purchased license from other emulators? How has that really been working? And which ones are you using on there?
Well, I wasn't really going to go into it, but I really don't. I think at this point it's like, who really cares? So I'll give you a full rundown of what we've got. So we've got Mendefin, obviously, is something that we've worked with. Saturn, PlayStation, TurboGrafx, and we have SNES as well. Now, SNES Faust emulator is something that was sort of mid-stride. It wasn't a fully complete emulator. We actually did talk to some other emulator developers about licensing theirs, but they didn't feel comfortable doing it. So we ended up developing the majority of, or a good chunk of this SNES emulator for this project. So not only fixing a ton of bugs and working on, basically just testing the entire library, producing new builds, going through and adding DSP support for the various DSP-based games that are out there. It's actually turned out great, though. The SNES Faust emulator was, I would say, it probably has the best sound I've ever heard of an SNES emulator, and that's one of the things that made me really fall in love with it. Having used other emulators in the past, and I won't name any names, but but audio quality, I guess I'm kind of an audiophile. I really care about that, and it was just immediately noticeable to me how good the quality of the sound reproduction is. So we're really excited about the SNES emulator. We're still doing a little bit of work. We've already implemented SA1, Super FX. I think you played Yoshi's Island when we met the other day, and then and we have STD1 and DSP1/2 and its variations going in now.
So that's another tremendous amount of work right there. So that's, it's a lot of effort to put into all that stuff. So, I just, once again, I'm saying this in a positive way, I just once again get the impression that this is just an emulator. Imagine, I hate to use this as an analogy, but imagine if the Retron 5 didn't suck. That's what you're aiming for, a way to legally play stuff through your original games. You have the CD drive there as well on top of all that, as well as a really nice interface and a way to update over the air. Now, the one thing that I can say is, although I would have liked to have spent a lot more time with it, the Saturn emulation was relatively low lag. I saw a lot of comments who might not have understood what about 2.5 frames of lag means, but to put that into comparison, it's about what you'd get from the NES or SNES Classic consoles, which, depending on your sensitivity, a lot of people love those consoles. And that's probably the same target market as well, a more mainstream, less, video file, crazy retro head. And I think that's great. There's obviously room for improvement, but compared to things like the Retron 5, I think I measured over 5 for one of the emulators. I think it was the Super Nintendo emulator, had 5 frames of lag over an original console on that. So 2.5 is certainly reasonable. And is that something that you're really aiming to hit that or lower on all the different emulators you're using?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm really happy that we got together and had you do the scientific test. I didn't have the equipment to do that in-house here, and I'm really happy that you got a chance to do it because just yesterday we took a look at the footage and we started kind of digging deeper on some of the timings of various things in Linux. And in fact, on the USB, we may be able to get it even a little bit faster based on the information that we got. So we are looking into that, and again, one of the great things about this console is that we are constantly going to be working on improving it. We have the emulator developers on our team, so I think when people see this product, it's kind of a faceless, like they don't know Polymega, they know their emulator that they use or their favorite systems and games. But what they should realize is that the people who are creating your favorite emulators are actually working on this, and they're paying attention to the feedback that people give. And we have ideas about how to make things better for people. And we may not be able to do everything all at once. And as much as we would like to say yes to everything that's out there, we do have to have keep everything in the backlog prioritized adequately so that we can actually release this thing on time. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's an opportunity, and I will say that based on the testing that you have, you'll probably see for the module controller ports, you'll reduce 1 frame off of that.
Oh wow! All right, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so that's our target, and when we go do the test next month with you, I would be looking at that being I would be very surprised if it was above it. Might even be a little lower. So we'll see.
Cool. So I'm trying to think of anything else. There was a few more things I wanted to talk about, but it just sounds like the overview of the product is, something that was misconstrued by the public, but it's just aiming to be a legal way to play your games. That's a third-party solution, so not the original. So it seems pretty straightforward. It's obviously not going to be for everybody, but I don't think that you guys thought it was going to be for everybody. So it's, anybody that says... Anybody that would enjoy using something like a NES or SNES Classic would probably love this. Maybe it's too expensive, maybe it's not. It's not my place to say. But anybody that has a calibrated Sony BVM that they've spent a week recapping and calibrating, this is probably not for them in its launch form. We spoke about potential things, and I don't even want to mention them because I don't want to put ideas in people's heads, but we talked about some potential that could be added to this to make it something that now it's a different experience. And I think that's the one thing that, as far as emulation in general goes, that people seem to forget. Because it's an emulator, you could do things that are absolutely impossible on all original hardware, regardless of what fancy add-ons or even FPGA you have. So for my personal hope is that after you get your launch worked out, after everything's going and you're looking to give people more of a reason to buy it, you'll think about all those awesome things that are going around nowadays where even grumpy old gamers like myself could say, hey, this is a different way to play it. Maybe better, maybe subjective, but it's totally different. So I think that's potential.
Yeah, there's certainly there's certainly a lot to look at there, and I think that's what we're most excited about. I think when we look at the initial launch offering, this is a nice way for you to play your systems and to digitally archive your collection with a beautiful UI that runs at 60 frames per second. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to worry about anything. If you have a nice living room and your wife gets mad at you for having your stuff all over the place, this is like an easy win for you. You can put this in the living room and she'll never complain about it. Your kids will play it, and you can have a great time with them, exposing them to games that they really didn't know much about before, and let them explore for themselves even, and find the games that are most interesting to them. But yeah, when you look at sort of what's next after that, that's where we really think the Polymega is going to especially shine. And I'm fine talking about it because we did show a little bit. I won't demo it or anything like that, but I think if you look at what's capable, and I guess this kind of goes back to the last bit of conversation we had, and I didn't finalize the list of emulators that we're using. I'll say here though, for NES we're using Messen. We have a fully licensed version of Messen, which is one of the greatest emulators out there right now for the NES. It's very accurate, highly compatible, and it also works with NES Maker games, and it also has a great feature called HD NES, or HD packs for the sorry, not HD NES, that's the other guys, but HD packs for Messen. Those are compatible on Polymega, and we're working on bringing new compatible versions of the HD packs to officially released games on Polymega. These are things that you wouldn't be able to do on an FPGA-based system, a purely FPGA-based system, and it's also one of the reasons we never were a purely FPGA system, because we wanted to do stuff like this. So I think when people look at the FPGA versus hybrid emulation thing, we never took the FPGA out of Polymega. It was that we always were going to be an emulation-based system, but we wanted to read carts in real time. What we don't do anymore is we don't read carts in real time. That's the main difference. But emulation, if you pulled that cartridge out of there, you're still running emulators, even on the original vision of the console.
Okay. I'd like to scroll through some of the comments now, and of course I'm going to skip all the useless ones, but not read all of them, but just kind of echo some of the things. But as a personal favor, can you please tell everybody exactly how much you've paid me to do this interview?
That'd be a big fat donut. I mean, like I said, so the reason we're even talking, I mean, we actually did try to talk a long time ago, but I think our schedules just never worked out. So the reason this all happened was because we got into I was DMing with Justin Wong, the Street Fighter player, and I was like, hey, we're gonna be in New York, or if you're around, well, do you want to check it out? And he's like, I don't live in New York right now, but talk to Arturo, who's my go-to. I trust everything he says. He's like the man. And I talked to Arturo Sabin, and he said, can I bring along a friend? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And when he said your name, I was like, okay, this should be interesting. But but it was man, I was glad that you came over. I mean, you got there a little bit earlier, actually, before Arturo, and we got a chance to really sit down and talk. And I think that when you, and I've noticed this with the Polymega quite a bit, especially due to, the perceived internet notion of what it is or what it isn't, that when people actually sit down and use it, they're like, this is pretty nice. And maybe it's not for me, maybe it is for me, but I'll say that this is a thing, and I can see where there's going to be some interest here. So I'm glad we got a chance to sit down, and I think that when you announced that we were going to be talking, I think that there's a lot of interest around this from your core audience. I know there's a lot of information that we want to get out there, and we're just happy to be talking to you about it, but we're not paying you anything, that's for sure.
Right. So yeah, I mean, that was exactly my thing too, is I saw one kind of bigger named journalist in the middle of a whole bunch of Twitter awfulness just tweeted, I saw it and it's cool. And to me, I was just like, oh, I can't. That sucks. That makes it worse. I'm sure that journalist didn't mean to do that in that way, but so yeah, I really, as you know personally, I always just say what I feel, regardless of what people think. So now I'm on the other side of it, saying it's a real product. And on a personal note, anybody in these comments that accused me of taking money to do this will get banned forever. I don't have time for those people. But to run through, there was some, let me go. A lot of people just weren't even okay with the fact that I would talk to you, which it baffles me why the truth wouldn't want to come out on either side of things. Wow, there's a lot of negative comments here.
I think there's just when you operate in a tribal manner, it's you want your horse to win, and any kind of opening of any gate that might.
But there were a lot of really good comments. Some of them were just echoing things we've already said, which is why I'm skipping over them.
Got it.
Somebody asked if I could ask you to clarify the screenshots that you'd shown of your CRT filters.
Sure.
Because a lot of people thought those were just straight up fake. And as somebody who spent probably an unhealthy amount of time taking pictures of CRTs, it did actually look like a CRT. Were those real CRT, were those real pictures of your filter?
Yeah, for sure. You saw the filters, I think, when we were there, or when we were in New York. Maybe it was just really briefly.
I do, but the problem I have is I hate all of these filters because I spend an unhealthy amount of hours looking at real CRTs through a camera lens. So to me, the best filter in the world isn't going to look good to me. I don't even comment on it because it's not fair. It's not accurate to what your average person would say. Now, your console is 1080p, not 4K, right?
Yeah, 1080p.
All right. So, I mean, based on what I saw in person, it looked perfectly fine. I don't think it's possible to get a real reproduction of what a CRT looks like until you're at least at a 4K resolution. And the people that I spoke to actually said if you want to mimic exactly what something like a high line count BDM is, you almost need 8K for that. So, based on what I saw, it looked perfectly fine to me.
Those were real screenshots. I was close in on it, so that you could, because you get variable lighting in whatever environment you're in and things. So I was really close in on it. But you'll notice there's no phosphor glow or anything like that. Those are really great things that we could do to try to model the composite filter or the RGB filter even a little bit better. But yeah, those are just natural shots of the system right off of my monitor right here at my desk.
It's pretty funny too, because on the one hand, I know I stopped putting scanline footage in almost all of my videos, and if I do have it in there, it's in there for 4 or 5 seconds, and I make sure to put up the disclaimer, scanlines always look like crap when you're trying to post them on the internet. You got to see it for yourself to decide if you like it. So I obviously that was in the forefront of my mind, and I did see a lot of people posting their own side-by-side comparisons. So it's pretty funny to see how, you could see how plausible these conspiracy theories might be, especially coming from some of the people that posted the side-by-side screenshots. It really did actually look like a CRT. So,
well, it's modeled to look like a CRT, but yeah, the resolution of the monitor is completely different, and the way that turns out. I mean, it's meant to look that way. It was quite flattering actually. some of the analysis that we got, but yeah, they're real. That's how we want it to look. I have a PVM at home. I play it in one of the living room on the floor with a game console, like how you're supposed to play a video game console. And we wanted it. I wanted to look like the PVM for the RGB filter, and Eric, the CTO, he wanted it to look like the composite filter that on the TV that he has. So we both just took our two favorite TVs and made filters that look like it.
Yeah, which is funny too, because when you asked what I think the composite filter looks like, in my head I'm going, it looks like shit, because composite looks like shit.
Yeah.
Just
exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I try not to ever comment on those because I'm not the person to talk to about that.
I prefer the RGB too myself, but it's all preference.
Yeah, to each his own. There's at the end of the day, in a situation like this, there's no wrong way to play it. It's not like adding that filter would add lag. That's certainly not something you'd have to worry about. But going through the rest of these comments, it's a lot of people that just don't understand emulation. But most of the legitimate and genuine concerns people had were of the impression that they got. And I will say, when I jumped in and was rude and mouthy, it's because that's kind of the impression I got as well. And that you love or hate analog's marketing. You got to admit, at the very least, Chris certainly is brilliant at it, whether you like it or not. At the time that you guys started picking on them publicly, they had already had two products out and one on the way that were FPGA based. And I think if this was a month after the Polymega was released, I don't think any of the blowback, I don't think you would have gotten any blowback at all. I think it would have been a normal Twitter post where 1% of the people are going to be assholes for no reason, and that's it. But I think that's something that you should take seriously, and I'm certainly not saying that to try to punish you or something. I'm saying that because out of all of the hundreds of comments I'm reading across Twitter and almost 100 on YouTube here, there are people that genuinely feel that the perception of the company is negative. So that can't be something that you ignore, especially based on some of these really well-written comments from people that are genuinely concerned of where their money's going to and stuff like that. So, do you guys
we've certainly taken that to heart. I think when you're in the throes of launching a product, and if you've worked on launching something commercially before, it's always a very high stress environment. We were a little bit out of line when we said some of that stuff, but at the same time, they did take shots at us, and we're not afraid to defend ourselves, and we never will be. And I think that really what needed to happen was that we needed to show a lot of the stuff that we were working on, and share with you guys the same experience that we've been having ourselves. And we're hoping that by talking to you and by letting more people get hands-on with the system, we have some really great hands-on in-store demos coming up pretty soon here in LA and some in Tokyo as well. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for folks to get their hands on the Polymega in the near future. And I think that when they do have a chance to give it a test drive, they'll learn what it's all about and form an opinion for themselves.
Yeah, I'm certainly not trying to harp on the point, but I'm pretty sure a lot of this negativity comes from the fact that the account labeled Polymega is saying these things. And I think in today's social media, people are used to an official account, not even responding. The official accounts just for updates and ignoring everything else. And, Bryan at Polymega, or Polymega Bryan should be the one, I think no one in their right mind would fault anybody for getting emotional about a project that they've dumped years of their life into. So I think that's something that I, of course, myself have to worry about now too, because for years, RetroRGB was just run by me. Now I have a group of incredibly awesome people that I'm lucky enough to work with, and I don't want my statements to reflect on all of them. So maybe we both should think about branching out our social media so that it doesn't look like that anymore.
Well, the thing is that I always feel like you have to look at the humans that are behind we're not some corporate faceless entity. We don't have thousands of employees. We have a small team of very passionate people who have been working very hard on the project, just like your projects. And I think that even when we had our exchanges in the past between you and between you and I during that time, I love that you and I can sit here and talk about the system and talk about games and just talk about our love for this shared hobby and passion that we have as normal people, even despite those things. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it's a testament to the way both of us approach these things, because I don't I don't really care about anything other than let's talk nerd stuff, right? And if somebody gets mouthy, I've never been afraid to stand up for myself, but I've also never been afraid to say I'm wrong or I'm sorry. And
exactly,
I'm proud of all that. I'm going to be a dick sometimes. I'm a human being. It's just kind of how it is. But after talking to you, after seeing the console, after envisioning the potential something like this could have in the longevity too, those modules, technically, if they don't wear out, aren't going to, it's not like they're going to become obsolete. A SNES module is always going to be a SNES module. So you're building the foundation on something that could last many product revisions across a lot of years. So I certainly, I would like this, even if it is just an emulator box that you plug your carts into, it's still something I think people need. And if it gets to be something better than that, it's a lot more people than you would even expect would be into it. So take all those things into consideration. See if, we both maybe need to hire some marketing people to make sure people can see our brands, I hate using that word, but our brands for what they're supposed to be and not for mistakes that may be posted publicly.
I think that's a very fair assessment, and we're definitely not perfect. We've had our faults, but we're dedicated to making sure that our communications are super professional, that we're helping people get informed about the system, learn about it, and hopefully get a chance to play it at some point in the future, because I think that's really what folks deserve to do. They deserve to play it.
So you said you're going to be back in New York within a few months, right?
I would like to be back late next month.
Okay.
So sometime before E3 would be great. And I'd love to set up another meeting, maybe over the same space or, wherever you'd like.
Absolutely. Depending on your schedule, maybe we could even meet at a different lab that already has equipment already set up.
Sure.
And, I would like to be more accurate because there's a chance I was half a frame off in my measurements, That means you could have even less lag than you thought. So I'd like to put this under a finer microscope, if you will. But obviously now, I think I've proven with a completely open mind on either side of things, just to get answers. And you guys certainly seem like a company that, if I did find a fault, you'd be welcoming how to fix that, not arguing with me, telling me it doesn't exist or something like that. So
that's what we're hoping for. Yeah.
I'm certainly looking forward to anything that to seeing what you guys have come out with. Anybody that has any questions or things that they specifically want me to test, post down in the comments. I'll keep a note of all the good ones, and I'll try to test those. The one thing that respectfully I will not be testing are things that are very obviously stuff that could be updated in firmware updates. There were some questions from some incredibly smart people that I know that were so detailed, like ask how they're reproducing, the color signature on this style of game from this emulator, and it's like, that's a great question, and that's something that can improve the experience that has no bearing on launch day. That's, no offense, no disrespect to my friends that said that stuff. So maybe for now, between now and launch date, just things that, as a realistic consumer, any questions or any things anybody would like me to test, what you would expect from a launch day product, and then we'll see how things go, and maybe we'll do another follow-up in the winter or something with all the little fine-tuned details, I guess.
I'm looking forward to you guys getting your hands on it and actually using it. I think that people are going to be really, especially the hardcore players. I have zero tolerance for input lag, and because I primarily, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I love shooters and I love the PC engine shooters especially. There's been some requests for videos of certain games I've had to hold back a little bit because it's it's one of my favorite systems, and I don't want to just like go in down that rabbit hole quite yet. But yeah, we really care about stuff like input lag. This stuff is, while this system is made for the mainstream, it's got to be something that I would play myself. And as someone who really deeply and passionately cares about my collection and the quality of the games experience that I have, I will make sure that it is good enough for folks at least at my level of collecting and things like that.
Cool. So yeah, just we mentioned lag again, just to give it some perspective. If you really did get it down to about 1.5 frames of lag, that's about on par with the FrameMeister. And that's a device that thousands of people have used for years and we're totally okay with. So I have had a few people echo the comments of, I have all of my original consoles, I have an RGB monitor, I have a room for that, but sometimes I just want to play some games and have it hooked up to my living room TV, and they would like to remove all the extra equipment. So while it sounds to me like it probably is more of a mainstream product, anybody that's skeptical, wait until it's released and see from there, because maybe it isn't. Maybe it is for us as well. But either way, I'm happy to see a company approaching this from the opposite of the way everybody else has. You look at the people selling pre-configured Raspberry Pis. You look at the Retron 5s based on stolen software that was eating people's game cartridges. That grip of death was killing it. And it seems like you guys are just the opposite of that. So we in the retro gaming world need this. I hope it's as good as you all plan on it being, and I hope people just approach it with an open mind, regardless of if they like it or not. No one's gonna like everything,
Totally, and that's not lost on us at all. I feel like if the product speaks for itself, we won't have to. Those folks will still talk and still hold what truths they have in their minds at the forefront. But overall, we think that we know that we're gonna create a great system. There's gonna be a lot of people out there who are going to enjoy it, and we think that we're really going to be able to help move retro games forward into the future and not just preserve them in antiquity. So I think that's really what we're focused on.
Cool. Well, this will be up on YouTube, on all the other platforms. I forget, Library and BitChute as well, and of course everywhere audio podcasts are. So if people prefer it that way, but I guess the YouTube comments are probably the best place, because those are going to be they'll be here for forever. So anybody who wants me to test anything next time, leave the comments there. I'll go back and reference this video the next time we meet, and I guess let's just keep in touch, and I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bob.
All right, thanks.
Talk soon.